while many celebrities seek to enhance their buttocks through Brazilian butt lifts (BBL. Sarah Baartman epitomized a natural form of BBL that makes the white folks to ponder. In the golden grasslands of South Africa's Eastern Cape, around 1789, a young woman named Sarah Baartman was born into the Khoi people, a proud nation whose ancestors had walked these lands for thousands of years. Sarah grew up learning the traditional ways of her people, mastering cattle herding, and absorbing the oral histories that connected her to generations of ancestors. But her world was changing. Dutch settlers had been encroaching on Khoi lands for over a century, and by the time of her birth, her people's way of life was under siege. As a young woman, Sarah found herself in Cape Town, working as a domestic servant. It was here that Hendrik Cesar and British military surgeon William Dunlop approached her with a promise that must have seemed like salvation. They spoke of London, of opportunity, of money to be made performing on stage. They promised her prosperity and independence. But the reality that awaited Sarah was far more sinister. In 1810, she arrived in London and was transformed into the Hottentot Venus, a name that stripped away her identity and reduced her to a racial stereotype. Imagine being displayed in a cage-like structure on Piccadilly, one of London's busiest streets. Paying customers lined up to gawk at her body, which Europeans considered exotic and primitive. The shows were marketed as scientific exhibitions, lending respectability to what was essentially human trafficking. But Sarah was not passive in her exploitation. Historical records reveal moments of resistance and dignity. She negotiated aspects of her performances, refused certain demands, and maintained elements of her cultural identity, even in the most dehumanizing circumstances. Her survival itself was an act of defiance. In 1814, Sarah was taken to Paris, where she was studied by French naturalists who saw her as evidence of racial hierarchy theories. Her life became even more precarious as she was forced into prostitution and her health deteriorated. Sarah Baartman died on December 29, 1815. She was approximately 25 years old. Even in death, she was not granted peace. Her body was dissected, her remains preserved and displayed in museums for nearly 2 centuries, continuing the spectacle that had defined her adult life. But Sarah's story doesn't end there. For 187 years, her remains stayed in France, a painful symbol of colonial exploitation. But in post-apartheid South Africa, activists, academics, and political leaders campaigned tirelessly to bring her home, seeing her story as emblematic of the broader African experience under colonialism. On August 9, 2002, National Women's Day in South Africa, Sarah Baartman was finally laid to rest in the Gamtoos Valley, not far from where she was born. The ceremony was attended by thousands, including President Thabo Mbeki, who spoke of her as a symbol of the restoration of dignity to African people. After nearly 2 centuries, Sarah had come home. Today, Sarah Baartman is remembered not as the Hottentot Venus of colonial spectacle, but as Sarchi Baartman, a woman whose story illuminates the intersection of racism, sexism, and colonialism. Her life has become a lens through which we examine how bodies, particularly Black women's bodies, have been politicized and commodified. Her story reminds us that behind every historical injustice were real people with dreams, fears, and aspirations. Sarah was not just a symbol. She was a young woman who loved, suffered, and hoped. She endured unimaginable exploitation with a strength that continues to inspire. In reclaiming Sarah Baartman's story, we reclaim our own humanity. We acknowledge that her life mattered, that her suffering was real, and that her dignity was never truly lost, only obscured by the prejudices of her time. For more of such video, please do like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button.